Good morning. This is Tracy Hales Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico. Today I'm talking with Victor Loun about his book, The 410 Club. Good morning, Victor.
Good morning.
Well, I really enjoyed The 410 Club.
Thank you.
When I started reading it, it read, because it's in first person, it started off like a memoir, but as it really built, though, and it really got more intense and complex as I read.
Yes, I've had other people read that say the same thing, that it becomes multifaceted, and part of my reasoning behind that was I was a high school English teacher for 12 years, and I recognized and heard and felt many students that seem to, their life is not so simple that they just deal with one issue at a time, and many times they're dealing with multiple issues, especially in today's world. And so I wanted to try to capture the fact that, their life is complex and can be traumatic, and it's difficult. So,
on so many levels, right?
Yes.
Now, Jasper's quite the intelligent, good-hearted young man, but boy, he doesn't have a good dish served to him, does he?
No, he struggles, and you hear all the time on the news or on TV. A lot of the times, the plot lines are, actual direct struggles with abuse. Part of me wanted to take a different tact with Jasper, and the fact that, teenagers can suffer a lot of emotional trauma just from neglect, from being ignored, and that has a powerful impact on their development as well. So,
right, his issues were subtle but really impactful.
Yes, yes, on many different levels: emotional, spiritual, physical. Yeah, I mean, these are a lot of things that, as a teacher, I would hear students talk about in discussions in class or in discussions walking down the hallway. So, on various levels, they all, contemplate these things and struggle with it and try to make sense of it. So,
well, you captured the voices of the teenagers really well. I commend you on that. That's not easy. This is set in the 70s. Why did you choose to set it then? So many of these issues are ones students see today.
Right. Part of the reason I did that was I don't know of any great fictional writer, maybe even any fictional writer, period, that's when they are writing fiction, some of their own personal experience doesn't come out in the pages. And a lot of the things that I talked about in the book either, were based on experience, or they're based on people that I knew, or things that I had heard, or stories. And so I guess I just said it in the 70s just because these issues that teenagers have been struggling with, they have been going on a long time. They're not just necessarily something that they, have struggled with since the advent of social media, for example.
Right, and the different places that Jasper lives. He starts out in the Four Corners area and goes to, is it Maryland?
It is Maryland.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes. Right. I just think as a writer it would be hard for me to write about places that I had never been before and still be truthful and capture the feeling and the atmosphere of those particular places, not only physically but emotionally, and so all these places that are listed in the novel are all places that I have lived before, and so I wanted to capture some of the essence of what it was like to live in these particular places. So.
Yeah. Well, it's really effective with the not only the descriptions of this area, but also the descriptions of living on a farm and the hay baling, etc. Yeah.
I have baled quite a few hay bales in my time, so that was certainly one part of the book where that whole atmosphere and the whole action and the interaction between farmhands, a lot of that was all based on, things that I myself had experienced, especially as a young child. I don't think it's that much the case anymore, but certainly when I was growing up, you were on a farm, you would start young, 10, 11 years old. You're expected to be able to drive a tractor and be able to bale hay and basically do manual labor with the emphasis on man. And so you grow up quick. You get exposed to things quickly that you wouldn't normally otherwise be exposed to. And I wish that I could write like Hemingway and be simple and direct and use few words and capture so much, but just my writing style is, at times it's more detail-oriented, and certainly, those times where I was describing life on the farm, the types of tasks that Jasper had to do, are detail-oriented because that's just my style of writing.
And that's great. I mean, maybe we all wish we wrote like Hemingway, but we don't, and that's okay. That's okay. It works for this. Now, who is your intended audience? Was it for adults?
The audience was, it was twofold, really. That's always one of the first things that I think about whenever I'm writing a book. Who is my audience? And that's certainly something I try to share with my students as well. And first and foremost, obviously, the audience would start out with, anybody that's coming of age. The book spans, from the time that Jasper was 11 up to the time that he graduated from high school. So
right.
That entire audience, 11 to 18-year-olds, whether they were girl or boy and the types of things they struggled with, that was my audience. But also, I believe that adults could glean a lot from, if nothing else, just reminiscing the past. And I hope and suspect that a lot of the issues that were brought up in the novel, they may have experienced when they were kids, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and so that they could identify with the emotion that Jasper felt as well.
I agree. I also think that there's a big message in here about listen to what these kids are saying. Jasper had a hard time with certain adults believing him.
Yes, and that kind of was tying into, I hear this complaint all the time, and it just makes me crazy that especially today's generation, social media, they don't care. They're not going to be able to lead our country, and take us places. And I cannot count the number of high school students during my teaching career that helped me to sleep soundly at night. I know we are in good hands, and, children get a bad rap because we can't identify with them, and they use different languages than we do, and because we don't understand their language, we write them off as being incompetent or slothful or, indifferent, and that is not the case at all. And so that was part of my rationale for that as well. I wanted, the older generation, my generation, to think about that and to trust that we're going to be taken care of, and
right.
It's going to be all right.
We're in good hands.
Yes.
So you taught high school English.
I did, yes.
And that was in the Four Corners area, was it not?
It was. I started off teaching in Maryland, outside Washington, D.C., and which is a whole different population than the population out here. And then I came and I taught 4 years at Piedra Vista High School in Farmington, and I had a wonderful experience there. Many of the students that I taught there are very near and dear to my heart, and the colleagues as well, and it was a fantastic experience at PV, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And you did some time at San Juan College also.
I did, yes, for a year. I guess I was basically the teacher teaching teachers reading strategies on how, if you're a music teacher or you're a geometry teacher or you're a gym teacher, those are all different languages, and so we talked about reading strategies on how to get people to understand those different languages and those different symbols, different codes, and that, language is not just, exclusive to English. There's lots of different languages that all have to be learned and, and understood. So
now you wrote another book, The Trudging of Wow, before this one.
I did, yes.
But I didn't read that, but I was looking at it, and it looks like it was a bit different than Jasper's story in the 410 Club.
Yeah, that one has many layers as well, and it was written in third person. It is essentially a love story that takes place in the modern era, but due to various issues within the couple, they have a lot of struggles and consequently a lot of aha moments that they experience, and one of the spouses dies, and so the remaining spouse is left with 2 children and lots of questions. A lot of the second half of the book is him dealing with how do I move forward and grieve and take care of 2 little ones and stick his big toe back out into the dating scene again, because he was fairly young when he was in his early 30s when it happened. And so I saw a market there, an audience there, because I see a lot of books about grief or a lot of novels about grieving, and a lot of times they would talk about their loss and they would talk about the grief, and then you would get to about a year after the loved one's death, and then all of a sudden there wasn't a whole lot out there about, well, where do you go from there, because grief just doesn't stop after 1 year. It goes on, and how does the grief move from grief to sadness, and can people like that love again? And so that novel was full of questions as well. And and that book, The Trudging of Wow, took me maybe 15 years to write.
Wow.
And the 410 Club took 7 months. It just kind of poured out of me.
Oh, wow.
I'm not the kind of writer that has a specific timetable that, I've got to churn this book out within a certain period of time. And just kind of let it happen as it happens. So
interesting how each one is different in their creation.
Yes.
I know that as an English teacher, you probably talked about the writing process. And so what is yours?
I've tried all different ways, and I just kind of, after a while, just kind of settled in what felt right to me. I would read about how Jack London made himself sit down and write 1,000 words a day, and that, I'd read Annie Lamott and her writing process, and that, and other people would talk their writing process about getting up in the morning and churning out a certain number of hours. And what I finally settled on is, believe it or not, I have a ranch up here in Mancos, and so I do all like my manual labor and ranch stuff in the morning, and something happens, and I can't really explain it, but early afternoon seems to be the best time for me to write. It just kind of all starts to pour out, and maybe it's because, then the sun is shining on the La Platas while I'm writing, and so I'm inspired, and I will write for maybe 3 or 4 hours, till supper time, and it's not, it's not your standard conventional writing process. I'm sure, as you could tell, being with your English background as well. My writing style, literary devices are very important to me. So, I used all kinds, practice what you preach. I used all kinds of different literary devices that are meaningful to me, and I'm a visual person, a visual learner, so a lot of times the literary devices that I use are because those are things I see in my head, and so when I write them down, I'm hoping that the audience sees the things, sees them, smells them, hears them, tastes them in their head as well. So, I used lots of imagery and also as an English teacher, I'm sure you could see I had lots of allusions in there to different, momentous novels that have been written in the past. Lots of, parallelism, repetition, you name it. I really, call me crazy, but, I've spent a lot of time teaching novels in high school English, and part of me thought, why couldn't I write this novel and then someday somebody would make a packet out of, all right, so one of the activities you're going to do while reading this book is pull out all the literary devices and why are they significant and how do they contribute to the theme overall and all that kind of stuff. So, those things are important to me, and they make writing rich and
they're not over the top, but they're subtle and they really do enrich the thing. I noticed that as an English teacher. Some people wouldn't, but this might be a good time for you to read something for us.
Okay, sure. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Great.
The experiences that Jasper had living out here to establish some relevance. And some of the things I read about, hopefully people can relate to, since we all live in the Four Corners area, and maybe they will identify it as well. So I will start with this. Jasper starts off with, I feel the need to go home. I peered into my plate. I knew that this would be an inconvenience for him. I thought that your childhood was not a particularly gratifying time in your life. Jasper is talking to his uncle right now, and they're on their way out to California. I don't know. I just feel the need to reconnect to something that grounded me, maybe to my mom and dad, maybe to the mountains. I'm just searching for wholeness. He clasped his hands in front of him and leaned forward. We could turn north at Albuquerque, but it's about a half-day trip out of the way, my uncle calculated, as he pored over a highway map like he did the last 2 mornings. Perhaps we could do some hiking in the mountains while we're there, he added, increasingly warming to the idea. I remembered. Sure, there are a ton of trails, all beautiful. Let's do it then, said Uncle Stewart, cracking his knuckles. 9 hours later, we were pulling to Mancos, Colorado. Why don't we stay here for the night? Uncle Stewart suggested. Fine with me. We're only about 10 minutes from the house anyway. Mancos would never be more than a one-stoplight town, but the landscape felt genuine. 1 country store, 1 bar, 1 gas station, 1 motel, 2 streetlights. All of the thoroughfares into and around town were dirt roads, except for the main highway. Spurred, unshaven, chapped ranchers with sweat rings encircling their cowboy hats drove dusty, acquiescent Angus cows and their bawling calves to the village twice a year, once in early summer to steer them up to mountain pastures, and again in early fall to herd them back to market. The tourists loved to snap photos of the seminal event and the grizzled features of each cowpoke. Wholesome, wrenching work. The Old West was not dead yet. When we arrived, the taffy and orange sherbet clouds were billowing over the top of Mount Hesperus, the northernmost point of the Navajo Nation. The sunset blotted the shadows up to the summit. Snow patches on the peaks had almost completely melted for the year, yet the smell of pinyon and juniper wafted through the valley air. Later that night, I snuck out from our banal motel room to behold the Milky Way, smudging the dome of the nighttime sky. I hadn't forgotten its vastness and its incomprehensibility. The copious stars were breathing in and out, hushing me, reducing me to right-sized, then filling me with hope. The next day I went back to the homestead. Weeds had swarmed the property. The roof had fallen into my old bedroom. The remaining rusty junk was indistinguishable from the buckskin land. The wind whispered emptiness. I felt severed from my childhood home and wondered if I had made a mistake. A twinge of pity fell around me for my father, strangely enough. But the mountain's intransigence would not let me go. It dribbled into my depths. My uncle and I spent the next few days hiking through the alpine tundra on trails named Shark's Tooth and Killpacker, where legend had it that a miner had eaten all of his compatriots to get through a particularly brutal winter back in the 1800s. My thighs eventually screamed for respite. Camped out at Navajo Lake, where dozens of cutthroat trout languidly floated at the mouth of the Dolores River, waiting for the stoneflies to rise, and the marmots barked at us in warning and tried to chew holes in our backpacks whenever we were distracted. I reposed at the edge of that lapping lake all the next day, surrounded by 3 jutting mountains in cathartic solitude, propped on my elbow, reading Walden and being fully present in the moment. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I wanted to live deep and suck all the marrow out of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. Pop and crackle of the dinner campfire reassured me as we cooked our catch whole in tinfoil amongst the white-hot rocks, the meat neatly separated from its bones. I secretly sent a prayer into the trilling waters, thanking the trout for their sacrifice. The deepening sky crowded down on me, probing my soul for authenticity. All was still. Then a porcupine came to visit, smelling our succulent morsels. When he saw his competition, he shuffled off into the shadows. After supper, we followed a pair of bighorn rams with our binoculars before they disappeared over the crest of a glowing sunset ridge. Our ears strained for a sound, any sound. Then a bull elk bugled off in the distance, while abject darkness settled into the earth. The nightly haunting yips of coyote began to emerge. Uncle Stewart assured me that I had nothing to worry about. Forgetting to put on my headlamp in the middle of the night, I tripped over a root, locating the base of a tree for an outdoor toilet. Its limbs slapped me in retaliation. Untampered wildness, not subject to the whims or laws of man. Maybe elsewhere the world was changing, but not here at 12,000 feet primeval unison.
I was hoping that was the part you would read.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's my favorite part.
Is it?
Yeah.
That was definitely based on personal experience, and that was definitely one of the glorious moments of my life for sure. That trip. So,
and for Jasper, it brought closure, and the wreck of the old house, etc., and the beauty of the countryside. I think it works really well.
Right. I mean, I heard it before, but I think it bears repeating again, and that is, nature can be a salve as well and heal people, and sometimes it's, especially when you live in urban areas and don't have that opportunity, how important it is to get out and be still long enough
Right.
to hear and to heal. So.
Right. So what are you working on now?
I am in the process. I have started another novel, and the setting is in the middle of a school lockdown.
Oh.
And it's actually based in Farmington this time. Obviously, like many people, in Aztec and Farmington, the Aztec shooting
Right.
was, I guess it's almost 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Really affected me, and so the setting is during the midst of a lockdown, but there are several different characters. 4 of them are students. One of them is a teacher, and the students all kind of knew each other when they were young and were really close, but kind of drifted apart as they got older, and now they're kind of thrust back together in the middle of this lockdown. And so it kind of describes, it gives their backstories, and part of the message there is that we really have no idea what's going on in other people's lives, and people may look like they've got it all together on the outside, but when you go home, it's a different story. And so, it's
Cool.
been an interesting journey so far.
Oh, great. When can you expect, or when can we expect to see that?
I think my publisher would love to have something by the end of the year, maybe sooner. And so, I wish I had a timetable, but I don't.
That's okay.
So, hopefully sooner rather than later is probably the most specific answer I could give.
That works. Absolutely. Now, you have a Facebook author page where listeners can go and see what's going on, and they can find the book just about anywhere. I know Amy's Bookcase has it.
I was going to do a reading there. It was actually for this Saturday, and the coronavirus just kind of kind of postponed that. There was a literary festival up here in Cortez I was going to do in September that has been canceled, and I had a book reading at our local library, which has been postponed. So, this is one of those times in life where this is so clearly out of our control that I just kind of step back and say, okay,
right.
Everything's going to happen exactly the way it's supposed to happen, and
Right.
I just need to come to acceptance. So,
Right.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that, certainly the owner of Amy's Bookcase, she told me that she would let me know as soon as possible when, in fact, that could be rescheduled. So I'm hoping maybe sometime in the fall I can get down to Farmington and at least do a book signing down there.
Oh, that'd be great. And we will be able to find that out on your Facebook page, correct?
Yes.
Great.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we are just about out of time, Victor. Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. Just give a shout out to all my former students and colleagues at Piedra Vista High School and San Juan College, and I still think about you and miss you guys and hope you're all doing well.
And that was Victor Loun talking about his book, The 410 Club. This is Tracy Hales-Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.